coming up, and I just wanted to point this out. Wednesday night, we're going to start our new quarter. Jeremy's traveling, and he's doing our Wednesday night class. And so we'll do our last Wednesday singing on the first Wednesday this time. That's the way it's going to work. So this Wednesday, prepare to be a singing here. And I would like the theme to be prayer. And for all of you to kind of put in your thoughts, just email and text what your thoughts of those songs might be. And we'll find some song leaders to lead those. And that'll be our night on Wednesday night. And that's for all teachers, by the way. Your Wednesday quarter will start then the next Wednesday. Sorry about all of that. I think there's still more I have down here. Singing this afternoon, area-wide singing at Smoky Hill. Really would love for as many who could be there to be there. It'll be very encouraging. Yesterday, we had a chance to do it was a camp reunion singing. I've sung so much in the last few days, and Wednesday's coming. But there's something about it, and as we even just sang, and let us through these thoughts. Songs are these thoughts that we're putting up there to God. Occasionally, you know those words and you close your eyes and you just, whatever you're going through or processing, God kind of just becomes the biggest, where he belongs, enthroned. And even yesterday as we sat and we sang, and I recognize there's people going through all kinds of things in this world. And what a blessing to be able to stop and remember who God is. And so this singing night will be a good reminder of that. We have a congregational meeting next week here. I think Lisa's already sent the email out about how to kind of prepare for that. And then we're going to do a Word of the Year study on January 27th here at the building. That'll be on a Saturday, and so make time for that. I think 10 a.m. is what we said about that. And so that's a whole lot of things to say. But I do want to say this. I mentioned the singing yesterday. People are in all different places. My sister had kind of, I guess, an epiphany when her husband passed. Unexpectedly, she found herself doing things that you don't think you're going to have to do. One of those moments for her, like kind of where it came to a head, was we were in town and she told Katie, I need to go to the airport because Donnie's remains are coming back from England and we have to evidently claim these. Never thought I'd be doing this, she said. I walked through the airport, and the one thing that hit her as she felt all alone, somewhere she never thought she would be, is, how many times have I run through this airport and someone else was here to do this? And so I just want you to think, and I want to express somehow that no matter how great things are for you, they're maybe not for someone else. And so we're aware, no matter how bad they get in my life, it's good for me to see, God's doing other things in other places too. And so wherever you fall, know that we're in an imperfect world, waiting for a perfect end. And God has complete control over how that all comes about. And just wanted to leave you with that peace of mind. And ultimately, try to introduce what's going to be a series that we'll take on this next month. Now, obviously, next week will be a pause because we're going to have a focus for the first of the year. But this is a series I want to introduce today that we'll spend some time in. And it's really the church as a family. One of the metaphors that God puts on top of the church concept is this idea of family. And I love it. And I think it's good for us to really focus in on what that means. And so we'll be doing that. And a lot of it in the coming month will be how we talk to one another, like the practicals of it, right? Good communication and wise communication. We'll have all of this out. But today I just want to kind of hit that concept, that why I think I've always clung to the concept of the church as a family is that I really don't like feeling alone. And so that's what we're going to look at here today. But first I want to, this came up as a verse of the day today, and I just thought it was amazing having just studied through Hebrews. Of course, you're going to have to bear with me. I will read it from the Message. That's how it popped up on my phone there. But this is a passage you know all too well, and I actually really like reading something you know really well in a different way. It's going to make you hear this a little bit differently, so please listen. Let's do it, full of belief. Confident that we're presentable inside and out. Let's keep a firm grip on the promises that keep us going. He always keeps his word. Let's see how inventive we can be in encouraging love and helping out, not avoiding worshiping together as some do, but spurring each other on, especially as we see the big day approaching. And this puts onus on us to always be aware that we are here to give to others. And so I just wanted to put that on your mind and then get into this concept of the family of God solving what was the original problem of mankind. Do you know, before sin entered the world, man had a problem. And God made sure, because he saw it was not good for man to be alone, that he was on the solution to that problem. That's what we're going to talk about here just to start this morning. So I'll just give a warning as we look at the church as family. And this is important to think about as maybe a thought to drive this whole series. And that is, we pay a high price when we put a low priority on community. That's true of the church. It's true of your personal family. You pay a high price when you put a low priority on valuing that family that God has blessed you with. And so being part of a family comes with certain expectations. I thought a lot about my family of origin, kind of growing up. The back part of our table was a revised old church pew my dad had found, and that was our back bench. I thought about this for a while. I was the only kid on that bench. I think they had me on a pew every meal. I think they were trying to teach me something, but there I sat. There was just this unwritten code, like, our family is this. And it was never spelt out. It was never written down. We didn't, memorize a motto. But it was kind of always spoken in subtle ways or expected in subtle ways through my family. And the first one in our family that was just an expectation is that you would be at this table at dinner. You would be there. And by the way, you would come with limited expectations. You didn't get to ask what you were going to eat. You didn't get to demand something else. This is what you had. And frankly, it was always great. I always ate well. The other one was that you would pitch in around the house. That you were expected as a part of what this family represented and who they wanted to be a part of what was going on. And though, frankly, siblings and I complained about it all the time, it was never overwhelming. In the end, we didn't do hard labor. We just were a part of the family. And then another expectation is that you would reflect the values of this family in the family. When you were at school, when you were at work, where you were among friends, when you were playing around, no matter what, you would represent who this family was. I guess the unspoken rule was always, remember who you are. And I think that's one of the greatest things this concept of family reminds us of here. Not only are we not alone, but we represent a bigger body. And these expectations helped every member in our family thrive within the family. And we understood that when someone wasn't living up to that, we would encourage them to the standard. We would bring them in and correct the problem. And so in the family, we were never bored. Just for younger parents, this was my mom's rule growing up, especially in summer. If any of us said we were bored, she would show us a cupboard that needed to be cleaned out. And we got over boredom really fast in our family. But here's the point. More importantly than all the things those values blessed me with, you were never alone. You were part of something bigger than yourself. And I think that's one of the big, like I said, earliest problems the Bible shows us, is that we were not created to be alone. And as wise as that sounds, I think it's interesting that God exposed that as an issue before he solved that. He lets it come about. And I would just say, in our world of fast-paced, busy, go, constantly consuming thoughts and entertainment and work, there are a lot of times when you just feel like being left alone. But the truth is, it's never that fun for that long. We weren't created for that. There was an article recently in the Chicago Tribune that stated something I thought was very profound. The columnist was a woman named Marla Paul. And what she did to her readers is she just confessed out loud. She just said, transparently, I am lonely. Now, she went on to write within this article that this was nothing that she saw coming. Like, her life didn't present that. She was married, had a family, had a very busy career, but she just said, I am lonely, and this loneliness saddens me. She writes, how did it happen that I could be 42 years old and not have enough friends? She asked her husband, am I doing something wrong in my social life? Am I doing something out of step? She began to realize the more she wrote and talked and related to those she was talking to, that she wasn't the only one. That this was a problem for many women that she talked with, who seemed to be just filling up their days with work and being unsatisfied by the results. Now, within the article, she mentioned, by the way, that she had recently read a story to her daughter, and that story kind of sparked something true. It was the story of the ugly duckling, as written by Hans Christian Andersen, and here's what she said about it. She said, I just felt like it expressed everything so perfectly. She said, there's this bird who flies from place to place looking for creatures to whom it belongs. The bird eventually finds them. Sadly, she continues in her article, I hope I do too. When this was written in the Chicago Tribune, this was several years ago now, her column grew in popularity by 7 times. I mean, that doesn't usually happen when these articles go out. It was a major success, and people kept writing back. Everywhere she went, people were coming up to her and saying, I feel this way too. Thank you for saying this out loud. This is what I'm going to. Why is it so difficult to make close friends? Now, this may be surprising. I'm just going to put this out there. Loneliness is not just a problem among women. Men suffer with this too. In fact, recent studies showed that men are just as likely to feel lonely as well. One survey of men in this country showed that 90% of those asked said they lacked one true friend that they can confide in when they really needed them. So, what does all that add up to? What does all that mean? Well, there's one more thing I want to share before we get to that, and that's this. There is a sense, I think, in which loneliness can be a reality, but sharing it is not something we want to do. Another study took place in which they polled twice the same group of people. They just changed the wording slightly. The first time through, they asked this group, do you feel lonely, and state your name. Very few people were willing to admit that they felt lonely when they had to put their name on it. The second one, they asked the same question, no name needed, and it just jumped up with those who said, I feel absolutely lonely. So what happened? But when the name was required, when we had to take ownership of it, people wanted to make it seem like everything was okay. And if you ask me, I think that's something we do too much. I've brought this up as a word that Christians need to eliminate in our gatherings together. Fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Okay. We want people to think we're okay. This has led to so many problems. I've marveled at the work of Mother Teresa in her life, that she was able to go to the streets of Calcutta to cast off people known as invisible or forgotten. Those literal lepers who no one wanted to touch, and bring them in and give them love. And in all of her work, she had this quote that I just thought was really interesting about humankind in general, and that is, loneliness is the leprosy of modern society. And no one wants anybody to know that they're a leper. What a connection to how much we may not be willing to say, I'm just lonely. Another one I enjoy is musician, theologian, and physician Albert Schweitzer was really, in his life experiences, above all, a true humanitarian. He set as a life goal, and you talk about having goals, he wanted to alleviate suffering. That's it. That's all he wanted to do. And he observed as he tried to help and heal and bring people together, he said, one thing I notice is we are all so much together, but we're dying of loneliness. Now, these thoughts, that article, are all onto something I think is just foundationally true. But the reality, as often happens, I think God said it best. You see, God created the heavens and the earth, the beasts of the field, the birds of the air. And what did he say every time he created? It was good. Everything was good. That is, until he made man. And then it happened. And by the way, I don't think in any sense God was surprised by this. I think he's making us aware of this. He created man, and the first problem, the first of God's concerns for mankind occurred. God looked at all that he had created, and then he looked at man and he said, it's not good for man to be alone. And as people in this world, we are much too involved in the meaningless monotonies of life. I confess myself, it's just too much a consuming thought for us, those things that are destined to perish and pass. And so most of us are at least a little guilty of overachieving and being distracted. We can become obsessed, even enslaved by the meaningless, redundant trap of just getting through life. And while doing that, we're bankrupt with ideas of how to connect with one another. Gone are, and there's a little community in my town, and I would have loved to have lived there. There just wasn't a house available, and it's just nice. But the one thing that they did, it's called Porch Front Community. Every house on those streets has a front porch. And they do things throughout the year where they all get out on their front porch. And what that is really is a time gone, isn't it? When everyone came out on their front porch and they invited their neighbors in and had coffee or an iced tea, lemonade, and talked about, like communities connected. And our world has changed from that day and time. The truth is, I think we've gone to a society of achieving over connecting. And we need to be aware of that. Because God said it's not good for man to be alone. And this is my very simple point. It is not God's will that we be alone. According to his plan, he doesn't want us to be alone. We have a spiritual crisis in our world. And it is not simply that so many are lonely. I think ultimately is that so many are lost. That the ultimate connector between all of us ought to be God and Christ Jesus. And when that is lost, we are lost. Jesus called individuals to follow him. He called many who were single at the time they followed him. But he never asked anyone to go solo. Following Jesus is and always has been a team sport. And I think that's where this metaphor of family really comes in. Now, here's the second thought I want to give you. If that was the original problem and God worked to fix it, this is what he does. Ultimately, he has given us a family. And here's what we have to think about in terms of what Jesus came to do. Jesus came to do much more than just save individual souls. I know that sounds kind of weird to say. I came to seek and save the lost. Yes. But his mission was bigger than just saving individual souls. It included what he did in bringing all those individuals together to make something new, something great. Think about the announcement here in Matthew 1 at verse 21 of Mary and what this child would represent. She'll give birth to a son, and you're to give him the name Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. There's a group called out there. You see, Jesus came for the people. He came to create a community. He wanted to build a family. And so later it said, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Emmanuel. Not God with me. Not God with you. God with us was always God's plan. Doing life for Jesus will always amount to doing life with others. And this is actually how Jesus lived. He was fully human. And I'll tell you, humans are incredibly and incurably relational. And he was in tune to that. And I thought long and hard about how to make that illustration, and I thought of Tupperware parties. And for you young people, you have no idea what this looks like. But a child of the 70s and 80s, this was still going on. In the 50s, this... Just an interesting fact for you. In the 50s, a man by the name of Earl Tupper found a waste product. I mean, it was something plastic companies were just getting rid of, and he found a way to turn that into something more durable in plastics, something that he later called Poly-T, and created this food container storage system that just took off. But the only way you could get it is if someone hosted a party. It was mostly housewives, no party, and come over, and they would sell. And that was their only branding for a long time. In fact, even into the 70s, when I come along, before Mary Kay, these parties were a really good way for housewives to make a little extra money. And here's why I bring that up. It's not anything about food storage, but it's this. Here's what I think was genius about this idea. Why this strategy worked out so well for Earl Tupper. It tapped into one of humankind's greatest needs. It is the power of the gathering. Being together, community, family, just this all coming up. This is what spread for decades, this company's fame far and wide. So that's what I want to look at here. Where does that come from? That innate human desire to be together, to do better together, to be more together. Well, it all comes from how we are made, believe it or not, all the way back to the beginning again. In Genesis 1 at verse 26, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. And I've read this since I was a little kid, and I remember as this theme really starts to develop in my mind, this is a big statement. You know that God has always existed in relationship. We understand and we start to see as he unfolds himself through scriptures to us and reveals himself as who he is. He is Father, Son, Spirit, three in one. forever community, forever in relationship, forever in fellowship, forever together. And God created us in their image. Let us create man in our image. You see, we are image bearers of that God, and it is deeply wired within us to want relationship. Now, what you can do is you can read through the Gospels and you can notice just how often Jesus prioritizes being with people. In fact, one of the things as you go through the Gospels kind of on a repeat cycle, the times he goes off to be alone are very rare and it's limited. Now, often he's interrupted by the time that even starts. His priority seems always to be around others, to be in relationship is the idea. In fact, he was so often with so many different kinds of people that he was actually mislabeled as a partier in his ministry. He just couldn't wait to be around who else was there to be around. And I see in Jesus this concept of I'm going to be where people are. This is where I'm needed to be. And I think we need to challenge ourselves with what that looks like in our own community here. And I feel like I have to say this now to the introverts. I feel you. I understand. Nobody can be around all people all the time. I get that. And in fact, in a real sense, Jesus did retreat. There were times when he needed to recharge. And that was always prayer with the Father, by the way. It wasn't a selfish retreat. It was to recharge so he could then go back out to be with people. And so here's my challenge to you. Listen, you do not retreat and escape the world. You retreat to refuel so that you can engage the world. Get back out there and be where Jesus needs you to be. Because ultimately, Jesus was not a loner. He was a lover of mankind. He was a lover of community. And so here's a third thing to note as we go through this. If we're going to follow Jesus and be God's family, it means we have to like people. If we are going to be like Jesus, then we're going to have to like people like Jesus liked people. I've heard so many times, I can love them, but I don't have to like them. If you're there, try to like them. It'll help you love them. Not the whole thing, not every little bit. You take it all. We're all imperfect, but start to see it like Jesus saw it is the point. Because everything Jesus preached, he practiced, and everything he walked was backed up by what he talked. And the whole of his life, he summarized into 2 commands that he lived his life by. He didn't quote a bunch of scripture. He didn't say how well he knows the prophets. He said there's 2 things you need to remember. You love God and love others. And if you look at his life, that's all he was up to all the time. We need to listen to that. And so often, Jesus showed us the best way to actually love God is to actively love others and then put that into practice. Have you ever noticed in that one sermon? I'm not going to have you look at the whole Gospels. Now let's look at Matthew 5 through 7 in one sermon, how Jesus really emphasized this point of community. And ultimately, as you read through Matthew 5 and 7, the Sermon on the Mount, you kind of see what he's up to here. That it's just assumed that those who will follow him will be in community. They'll be doing life together. And so in those first Beatitudes, he says, blessed are. Never is, blessed are. Like the people in my family do this. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom. Blessed are those who mourn. They will be comforted. Blessed are the meek. They will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. They will be filled. Blessed are the merciful. They'll be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart. They will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers. They will be called children of God. You just see the foundation of that here. Here's another one. We're very familiar with this. In the prayer he taught his disciples in Matthew 6, 9 through 13. This is how you ought to pray. Our Father in heaven, give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation. Deliver us from the evil one. Look, just from the very beginning, Jesus was telling us, stop thinking in terms of me, myself, and I. It's all about the group, community, God's family. It's about the whole movement. Listen again to the golden rule. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Look, this is the point, but it gets hard. Probably the hardest thing Jesus ever says about the importance of community is, I tell you, you love your enemies and you pray for those who persecute you. And this is what he's saying. Doing life with people is messy. It is complicated. Why? Because every one of us is messy and complicated. The moment you move within a family group or community group and think you got it figured out and it's all their problem, you're in trouble. We're all a mess. And yet God-centered between us can help us out. There is going to be conflict. There will be misunderstandings. We will have differences of opinion and interpretation. And above all, we all have, anyone with more than one child knows this, extremely different personalities and often difficult. And with all of that, Jesus still says, you know what? It's better that you be together. There's something about that we learn from. And with all the realities of being human and human interaction, you know what I'm amazed with the most? Jesus liked people. He liked people who were nothing like him. He saw value there. And the reason community, I think, goes so often missing among followers of Jesus is that we tend to do life based on like instead of love. And how easy in our world to like a post and have no connection with that individual at all. Oh no, you've set off an endorphin in their mind that says, oh, I got to like, but no connection. And so here's what I want you to think about. The family of God is always going to be held together by promise. I believe that communities stay shallow when we do life together based on preferences rather than promise. And I have an easy illustration here. I promise you I won't do this all year long, but I think it's just really relevant. We have watched in the last several years in our society the emergence of a brand new religion called tribal politics. And I have watched too many churches decide that they're going to put their name on a political leader or they're going to follow a political party, and I just cringe because Jesus likes everybody. And you're pushing a point, and you're pushing an example, and you're eliminating. But you think about the conversations you could have where you know within one sentence, I'm too much of a Democrat, I'm too much of a Republican, I'm too much of an undecided. Like, you just have a conversation with someone. Talk about their thoughts on climate or healthcare or immigration, and you know immediately whether you like them or not. Here's what I got to say. So what? So what about all of those things? Shouldn't our commitment to Christ and his mission transcend what we don't like about each other's politics? And if politics is going to be your God, the world doesn't end the way you want it to. It's time to really think about connecting over these likes and dislikes. Now, this is one reason I think the church in America right now is so shallow. Because we start to gather together based on what we like. Now, just work yourself through this model. How do you choose a church? I hear this all the time. Well, I really liked their music. I really liked their Bible programs, their classes for kids. I really liked their preacher. Once in a while, people say that. Here's the point about all that. What happens when those things change? And in this world, by the way, nothing stays the same. Those things do change. What happens now? Well, now you're left sitting in your own criteria, having to wonder, well, I don't like this. I think I better go and find a place I do like better. Just think. What that has done among God's people over many, many years is it has produced a system that endorses and baptizes consumerism. I'm going to stick with the product that I like. This fits me. And it's made a place where church leaders are scrambling always to come up with the right Bible program and make sure the right guy's talking and make sure the right things are happening so they don't lose people and you go somewhere else. I want us to really think about the importance of community based on promise. Because when we don't get this, we sacrifice what true community is. And the fact is, I can prove this. And everyone who's married here today can back me up on this. And I just want to say, to those of you who are about to be married or not married yet, I'm going to apologize for some disillusioning or shattering of your hopes here, but this is the truth. Katie and I have been married for 27 years this next month. I know that's shocking. I was like 10 when we got married. Katie was like 5. All right. I love her. I wish there was a way to say this next part, and this is not my lesson. I'll get here someday, but loving somebody consistently over time in the ups and the downs, there is something different about that love than giving up and starting over and giving up and starting over that our world has somehow been enamored by. And I love her more and more all the time. It's one of God's blessings in marriage. Now, there have been times when she was not my favorite person. And I didn't like her all that much. And if I'm going to be fair, there have been times when she felt the same about me, and probably with more consistency. But listen, we stay married not because we like all the same things, or we even like what the other does all the time. The reason we are still happily married, by the way, is that we each intend to keep our promises. And when you keep your promises in community, God blesses that. This is the answer for loneliness. Jesus is trying to build a society, a community that comes together and stays together. He's trying to show us that, look, it's not always going to be easy. There'll be difficulties, but this can be worked through. God between us, this will work. And it works because you make a promise. What binds us together is not compatibility. You know, having the chance to have counseled many people before marriage, I think the world really emphasizes compatibility. You got to figure out if you're compatible. Here's what I know. I don't think there's a man and woman on earth who are truly compatible. God made us so different, but with God between you, nothing can tear you apart. I know that. It is not your compatibility that matters most in community. It is your commonality. What brings you to the middle? What brings you to the most important thing in your life? And if that's Christ, nothing can break it, is the point. Because we are all sinners in desperate need of God's glorious grace. And so we can come together over the Lord's Supper, a time of inner reflection about who I really am, and think, wow, what God has done for me, and look what He's done for you. And we can do this together. You see, we come together not very much alike, but we come together over promise to love, because I need too much grace in my life not to give grace to you. And that's what Jesus came to build. And He didn't just talk about it. This is what I love about the Gospels. It's this demonstration of, I called my shot, but watch how it looks. It's the way that Jesus lived. And I'll give you one more thought to kind of put this intro together on, and that's this. If we're going to love like Jesus loved, it means we're going to have to get uncomfortable. I don't love confrontations. I don't love having difficulties. I love to just say I'm sorry and just don't bring it up. But I found out that doesn't help things in a tight relationship. You got to deal with it. Things have to be talked with. And here's just a little free advice. If you only want to be comfortable in your life, then never care. Just never care. But if you're going to care, if you're going to get to the point of love, it's going to require us to get past this idea of feeling normal. And I think, guys, we talked ourselves into this 4 years ago when there was a new normal. And we all longed for this. It's going to come back to normal. It's going to come back to normal. Well, here's the truth. Normal's not the goal. I want abnormal. I want the love of Jesus Christ. And we're going to have to talk through and walk through things together. We're going to have to want that because it's the love that Jesus modeled. And you can read through the Gospels and follow Jesus and watch this guy touch a leper. Had the power to heal him any way he wanted. What did that leper need even more than the cure for his leprosy? Human connection. And Jesus knew that. And watch him sit and have a conversation with a Samaritan, that's one buzzword, woman. There's another for a Jewish man. And ignoring all of that, he sits and shares with her the words of life. See him take the time to heal a foreigner's daughter. outside of Israel with love and compassion, and watch him face down a legion of demons to save one man. This is how we move our hearts to focus on what's abnormal about love, and we all need this reminder. It's how we learn to love deeper. It's how we learn to love more sacrificially. It's how we learn to love new people. It's how we learn to love without quitting. And that's my goal personally for me, and I think it'd be good for all of us. I have many basketball stories, but one that I always thought was interesting was the idea of Rick Barry. If you didn't know who Rick Barry was, great dead-eye shot from outside, and really one of the best all-time free throw shooters in the league. 90% career was his free throw percentage. But it wasn't that he just shot better, he shot different. Rick Barry, when no one else would do it, would do the shot. I don't know if you kids even know that. You know when somebody does this? What's that called? Okay, they know it. Good. Nobody knew a peachy last week, and that threw me. Granny shot. All right. He would go out on a court in front of a bunch of grown men, and he'd do his granny shot, and it worked every time. And it's absolutely amazing to watch that people wondered about this. And so Discover Magazine in 2008 hired physics professors to come and study what he was doing, and here's what they found out. Rick was right. It was a better way to do it. It's the trajectory of the ball, the softness as it lands on the rim, the backspin, whatever it was, this was the better way to take the shot. Well, here's why I bring that up. Wilt Chamberlain, famous basketball player, scored a lot of points, is the only man to score 100 points in one game. Now, as most big men are in the league, and I'm a big man, I mean centers and above, right? Shaq, what do you think they are as free throw shooters? They're horrible. There's something about being that big and throwing the ball down, it just doesn't work. And he was a horrible free throw shooter. But on the night that Rick scored 100 points, you'll see in the bottom stat column there to the right, he made 28 out of 32 free throws. Because he did it granny style. And I want you to hear something. He never did it again. It was uncomfortable for him to go out there. You don't think these guys were saying something at the line? But he made his shot. Now here's what I want you to think about as a church. We all care too much about what looks normal, even though it's been proven there's a better way. In the church, we tend to get into the tradition, the habit, the rut, whatever you want to call it, of doing something a certain way and resisting changing anything at times. And the truth is, we need to be real and look in and say, how can we be more like Jesus all the time? And so here's my just thought today. For this church, going forward, our granny shot, our getting uncomfortable here, the one that goes in most of the time, the one that is our sure shot, needs to be a rekindling, one, of our love for one another based on promise. I cannot guarantee you going forward, I will not offend you. I will not in some way bother you. I can't even guarantee you, and this hurts, that I won't really try to upset you. But I promise I want to be better at that. And that needs to be a promise that we'll make to one another. And the second thing I want to be our granny shot, our sure shot, our most likely to go in, is our desire to share Jesus with the lost and the lonely. I think that's what we're on earth to do, to love God and love others. And the truth is, we get to practice that quite often in community. And I'd remind you of that Hebrews 10 passage we had up earlier. Consider how to stimulate one another to love and good works, all the more as you see the day approaching. Do you know what we're here to do? Like this week, we need to be thinking about, how can I encourage Bill? How can I encourage Ed? How can I encourage, I need to be thinking, what do they need in their life from me? And I'll tell you, that'll fill up your plate right away. But it is a labor of love, and someone else will be doing it for you. And here, God has really shown us an answer to the truth that it's not good that we be alone. And I just want to be very sensitive right now and say this. No matter what happens, no matter how good the whole group feels, there will be somebody that feels alone, even in a crowded room. Don't say you're fine. It's not okay. Let us know how we can lift your load. That's our goal. That's our promise to one another. This is the beginning of, I think, a series that will help us as a family begin to relate deeper, relate closer, and really ultimately make Jesus the priority. That's my goal. If you're here today and you're not a Christian, then the real answer to your life's issues are to be right with God. If you could put on Christ this morning in baptism, what a great start to know that your sins are washed away and you have a clean slate before God. If you're here and you need our prayers for whatever reason, we can pray for you. We can help you. And if that's something beyond your scope right now, let somebody know before you leave. These are things I need help with. Let's carry each other's loads. If we can help you